Hi everyone, my name is Jen Greaves and I've been living with type 1 diabetes for nearly 30 years. And today we are talking about things I wish I'd known sooner about living with type 1 diabetes. Oh, so many things. Too long, don't read. Could be here forever with this one. But, I think there are a few key pieces that have really helped me along the way. Now that I've lived with type 1 diabetes for nearly 30 years, I think I've gathered quite a lot of lessons, quite a lot of information. I'm still learning, but I do think that there is a lot that I had to find out for myself. And I think that's the case for anyone living with this thing. Some of it just comes down to lived experience, but there are certainly things you can do along the way to help yourself gather the information that might just make this whole wild ride a little bit easier. Maybe you've been recently diagnosed and you're wondering what on earth is going on. A lot has changed since I was diagnosed in terms of not only the tools we have to manage it, but the thinking and the understanding that's out there around it. We just know so much more now, but that's not to say this isn't still a really complex, misunderstood and demanding chronic illness to live with. So if that is you and you have just been newly diagnosed, or even if you have been living with this for a long time and you're just wondering why is none of this making sense? First of all, I see you. Absolutely, I see you. I've been there. There are days when I am there. And yeah, just to say that this thing isn't easy. And I think if you're trying, that is kind of a big, big piece of the puzzle. But I know what it feels like when you feel like you're doing so much to try and get those numbers in range and nothing seems to be adding up. And that's not to say that this is going to help. Sorry about that. But I hope at least it gives you some things to think about, or you can relate to some of these things that I often had to find out the hard way. And there's this sense of like, nobody told me a lot of the time, but the healthcare professionals are amazing, but they're really there to kind of prop you up and send you on your way. And really from the get-go, it is about, well, certainly in my experience, me living with this thing and going out there. And to reassure anyone that needs to hear it, I live a really, really fulfilled, full up life that is incredibly lucky in my mind, incredibly happy. I've done a lot of things. I've been a lot of places. I've experienced a lot. So it is all out there and it is all possible. It obviously takes a lot of planning, a lot of preparation, and yeah, just kind of getting stuck in and testing and iterating and constantly adapting. A lot of what I'm going to talk about today is more mindset stuff, because I do think that's the stuff that, one, was harder to find or harder to realize, and two, has actually helped me the most, or if not equally as much as the tools. Obviously, we wouldn't survive without the insulin, and the diabetes technology has made my life so much easier. But the mindset stuff, the emotional side of living with this condition, is at times what I've felt the most lonely with and the most frustrated with. And there was a period where I really lost my way because I wasn't even aware of the emotional side of things, which we'll come on to. But thankfully, there is so much more awareness of all that now. And that leads me to say, of course, this is not in any way, shape or form advice. I am in no way qualified as a healthcare professional or otherwise. And if you are thinking of making changes to your diabetes management, it's really important that you speak to your care team. And if you do feel like you would benefit for some extra support, there are lots of organizations out there that can help you. This is all just my personal experience and my lived experience. I have done some other content around this stuff because I do find it really, really crucial as one of my kind of major ways of helping myself to manage type 1 diabetes, in the sense of just being equipped with the frame of mind that I think you need to live with something so ongoing, so relentless, so demanding as type 1 diabetes. So there's a few solo podcast episodes, there's a few YouTube videos. So wherever I am coming at you from today, there will be some links below in the episode description if you do want some more content. And this list is in no way exhaustive. I mean, I would be here for another 30 years if I really tried to distill all the lessons I've learned living with type 1 diabetes. But, take what resonates, leave the rest, and let me know below in the comments over on Instagram any of your kind of key lessons that you've learned through living with type 1 diabetes that maybe would help someone else. Let's do it. Number one, pre-bolus is a game changer. It certainly has been for me, and this is well backed up, well researched. So not medical advice, but it's all out there if you want to go and have a look. Pre-bolus, wow. So this is where you take your insulin a certain number of minutes before you actually start to eat your meal to give the insulin a bit of time to kick in, to get going, in the hopes that that post-meal spike in your glucose readings is going to be mitigated somewhat, and coming out the other side of whatever meal it may be will be a little bit easier on the glucose levels. Now, I went for the best part of, I would say, about 15 years, not knowing what pre-bolus was, not knowing, I mean, I don't even know if the medical researchers and experts knew what it was. I was diagnosed at the age of 8, and I remember someone mentioning this as a passing comment, as something that their consultant had said to them. And I was about 24, because it was back in the days of type 1 diabetes blogging. And if you've been with me since then, you'll know it's been quite the journey. But yeah, that is something that without a doubt has changed my life in terms of just those post-meal spikes. I used to whack in the insulin as the meal arrived, sometimes after, honestly, after I'd started eating. And I think the standard pre-bolus time is about 15 minutes. You'll have to check with your healthcare team about what might be right for you, because different types of insulin work at different speeds, and some people need more time than others. It potentially depends as well on the size of the meal, the type of the meal, etc., etc. But in general, I need to allow some time between taking my insulin and starting to eat the meal. That at times is easier said than done. If I'm on the move, if I'm rushing somewhere, if I need to wolf down my food for whatever reason, I'm about to go into an appointment, or I'm already on the verge of a hypo, etc. But yeah, in general, if I can, when I can, I will pre-bolus to give that insulin some time to kick in before I start eating. I know sometimes we forget, or I certainly forget. I know sometimes I actually take my pre-bolus and kind of forget, or I get stuck into an email, or I get distracted, and then I'm like, oh God, no, I really need to eat now. I took that insulin a little while ago. But for me, this all comes, actually, all of these points probably come back to how I want to feel as much as possible, which is healthy and happy, and not like I've been hit by a type 1 diabetes truck. So taking my pre-bolus and reducing the chance of an aggressive post-meal spike, or such an aggressive post-meal spike, is totally worth it for me. As often as possible, I will do it, because I like who I am when I'm in range. Point number 2 that I wish I'd known sooner about living with type 1 diabetes is that diabetes technology is my friend. Now, the access to type 1 diabetes technology has changed hugely since I was diagnosed at the age of 8. When I was diagnosed, the availability of any type 1 diabetes technology just wasn't really there. I was on finger pricks and injections. That's not to say it's available to everyone now. And that's not to say access is fair at all by any means. We still have a long way to go, certainly around the world. But for me, the reason I bring this up is because when there were the first whisperings and murmurings of insulin pumps, which in my case came before availability of CGM, I really dismissed it. And it was because I didn't feel comfortable about the idea, or entertaining the idea of wearing an insulin pump or using an insulin pump. It just felt very obvious, very medical, very statement-like, in terms of my type 1 diabetes announcing itself, making that announcement for me on the days when maybe I didn't want anyone to know that I was living with type 1 diabetes. So I completely dismissed it. And this point is twofold for me. And again, this speaks to me and my personal experience, because of the way that the access to type 1 diabetes technology has changed, certainly in the UK and parts of Europe. Everyone in the UK has access to a CGM as standard. For me, the CGM is such a significant tool in being able to manage my type 1 diabetes on the day-to-day. Until I had a CGM, which was maybe 20 years. 20 years of just finger pricking a few times a day, not having a clue what was going on in between those finger pricks, and then getting that data and realizing that I was essentially ping-ponging all day long between high glucose readings and hypos, crashing into hypos, overcorrecting, spiking after meals, crashing back down, and on it went. As soon as I got that CGM data, I could see exactly what was happening, and just enabled me, even when I was back on injections, which a lot of people still are, I appreciate that, to make more informed decisions about my diabetes and knowing what on earth was going on in between those very, very minimal finger pricks every day. Yeah, it really was a big deal. And that has been a friend, not an enemy, as maybe I potentially perceived it to be. Certainly from the insulin pump standpoint, when CGMs first came about, I think I was in my late 20s when I first tried a sensor, and I was all for it. I was fascinated by it. I thought it was amazing. But I know that the idea of wearing diabetes technology is, for some people, not a favourable one. And the second part of this is around the insulin pumps, particularly now that we have automated insulin delivery systems or hybrid closed loop systems becoming more and more available as the standard option for an insulin pump. I mean, for me, we are just a phenomenal team. We work together. I work with that tool to get the best outcomes possible, and I have to do so much less work, make so many less decisions for such an increased time in range compared to where I was before without it on injections, that for me, any undertaking in terms of wearing an insulin pump or having to learn the tools and technology and find out all the different features and functions and how it works, and getting frustrated at first when it doesn't work and things like that, for me, it's just worth it. We've been able to do so much as a team. I had a non-hybrid closed loop insulin pump prior to trying the AID systems, and that did involve a lot more work. But even then, having access to things like temporary basals and that kind of much more consistent bolus function was worth the extra work, was worth the undertaking. But for a long, long time, I just didn't perceive that to be the case. That's my journey. That's my experience. I know that insulin pumps aren't for everyone, or maybe they're not for you at this time, and that's perfectly okay. This condition is so unique to everyone that lives with it. And I know that access is another thing, as I've already said. So yeah, just in terms of my journey and the perspective I had on insulin pumps, especially back then to now, it's been quite the change. Number 3, I've already alluded to this one. For me, it was just such a huge unlock when it comes to living with type 1 diabetes, and that is that type 1 diabetes is an emotional condition as much as it is a physical one. And that, by that, I don't just mean the emotions that come with living with type 1 diabetes, but the hormonal aspects of this condition. Insulin is a hormone. I didn't know that for years. We as humans are made up of lots of different types of hormones. They all interact with each other. Some days they interact differently. Some days you have higher levels of certain hormones than others. And this really is, for me, quite an important piece of the puzzle to understand. And if you've been around here for a while, you will understand why I got so lost thinking that type 1 diabetes was simply, looking at my glucose reading, taking a certain amount of insulin, and that being it. There was no awareness or acknowledgement or understanding of the psychological aspect of this condition, of how my body was responding differently at different times of the day, at different days of the month, and just, my feelings about the fact that I live with quite a serious, complex, lifelong chronic illness. There was never any chat about that, and as I said, thankfully things are different now, and that is nobody's fault. Everyone was doing the best they could with the information we all had at the time. But if someone had told me before I got so far down the wrong path, like I just veered left at some point and went further and further that way, and really got myself lost and frustrated and sad and angry, and it was such a lonely place to be, wondering why I could not get to grips with this condition, wondering why I did not feel good on a day-to-day basis. And I was probably in my early 20s when that happened, when that light bulb happened. And that is the reason I started writing a blog. then that has morphed into, you know, me sitting here in front of you talking into this microphone today. So yeah, I really, really would love to go back and just give younger Jenny some of that awareness that there is more to this than finger pricks and glucose readings and insulin injections or insulin pumps. You know, it's just so, so, so much more than that. And that's not to say that in a way that's going to overwhelm anyone. For me, that was knowledge, and knowledge is power. It gave me more to go and look at and dig into and find out and understand about my body, my condition, all with the view to kind of getting better and feeling better and being in range more of the time. And I would say for me, you know, this whole thing of you don't know what you don't know, I think for me, the main sort of emotional or more psychological factors that impact my glucose readings are hormones, as I said. Stress would be a huge, huge one. And then, like, in general, I guess my state of mind, like how well I feel, how slept I am, these really do impact my glucose readings. And I sort of see my glucose readings now not as kind of an isolated number that tells me if I'm passing or failing at type 1 diabetes. It's a marker of just a much, much, much bigger picture of what my life is and what's going on. And when I notice my glucose levels being more elevated, or if I'm having those frustrating days, weeks, or even months, it's really a signal for me to take a step back and have a look at what's going on in my life and whether I've got basics in place, like, am I getting decent amount of sleep? Am I eating well? You know, am I super hyper stressed? Sometimes that's unavoidable. I might be on a project or I might be going through something, but at least then it gives me the understanding. The picture can be a bit more filled in, like the brushstrokes are all there, rather than just having this blank canvas with a number in the middle and wondering what the hell is going on. And with that information, I can also then give myself grace, because I know it's not just me doing something wrong and looking at that number and thinking, oh my God, why? You know, so that leads me on to the next point, which is I wish I'd known sooner that I need to be kind to myself, because there is no such thing as perfect type 1 diabetes. And I'm not sure that I ever really thought that, you know, 100% time in range was achievable. Time in range wasn't even a thing when I was younger. It was HbA1c. I would go to clinic every 6 months or whatever it was. They'd do the checks and they'd look at my glucose diary, handwritten with the blood spots all over it. And they would be like, yep, HbA1c looks good, off you go. And that would be it. And then in the meantime, it's just me trying to live my life with type 1 diabetes day in and day out. And obviously my parents when I was younger. But this is just a long, long road. And over time, of course, my hormones changed, my feelings changed, the tools that we had available to us with type 1 diabetes also changed. And as I evolved, my kind of type 1 diabetes management for a long time didn't evolve with me in the way that it needed to for me to feel my best. And I got to that point in my early 20s, where I was just incredibly critical of myself in all aspects of my life, not just my type 1 diabetes, but obviously with type 1 diabetes affecting my hormones, I mean, everything was completely out of whack. And it was just this self-fulfilling cycle of, like, speaking terribly to myself, having that awful space between my ears where I was so, so critical of what the numbers were saying, what else I was doing, what I looked like, and what was going on. And I was never good enough. And I wish I had what that person had. And I wish I didn't have to deal with this thing. And I think it just made everything so much worse. And the uphill struggle of type 1 diabetes is steep enough as it is. And like lumping that on top, that kind of heavy, heavy load of, you are not good at this, or you should be better at this, it just didn't help. And I just didn't deserve it. And I think being able to move through life, living with a chronic illness and propping myself up along the way, no matter what the numbers are saying, no matter if the alarms are screaming, having my arm around myself through that journey day in and day out has been a really, really important thing for me, just again, not feeling like I'm being swept under. And I just think compassion for anyone, whether you live with type 1 diabetes or not, is so important, because I don't think a lot of us offer it to ourselves. And it's especially hard with type 1 diabetes, potentially, because you've got this very clear, very tangible marker that says whether you're in range or out of range. And I don't now perceive that as me succeeding or failing at being a person living with type 1 diabetes. It's information, it's part of a bigger picture, and I use that information to make my next decision. And it's this ongoing fluid path. And I just feel like, since I've made sure that I'm my own best friend in this, it's been an easier path to go down, because the path isn't going anywhere. We have to walk it regardless. And I just wish I'd been a bit nicer to myself sooner. And I'm my own cheerleader now. You best be believing that. I absolutely hype myself up. I think I'm doing the best I can, and that is all I can do. And I like to extend that to others. But for a long time, I lived in that place of, I guess, fear, resentment, anger, and shame as well. And I definitely projected that on the people around me. So yeah, I would say just be kind to yourself. This is not easy, and it's a big job. You're doing better than you think. And I would say it's actually allowed me to do more, because I'm not so critical. I'm not just seeing that as like pass or fail. When I try new things and it, doesn't go to plan, inevitably I go out of range, because even a person without type 1 diabetes isn't 100% in range all of the time. I just kind of think, okay, but I tried and I made the decisions I thought were right at the time, and I'm engaged with this thing and I'm doing the best I can. And really, that's all I can do. And I've gone out and had this really cool experience. And maybe there were some frustrating parts of the day where type 1 diabetes stole my focus and my attention, or I didn't feel so hot. But I've done the thing anyway. I've gone out and done it. And now I have more information and for next time. And I know what's possible for me. I know that I can get out there and do stuff. And I think, yeah, I don't necessarily have to be best friends with my type 1 diabetes. I'm not sure I necessarily subscribe to that. You certainly have to make space for it, but I do think it's important to be friends with myself. And that is indeed my next point. You don't have to make best friends with your type 1 diabetes, but you do have to make space for it, because I was not willing to do that for a while. So I would completely dismiss this thing. And I think it's, maybe growing pains. It may just be being preoccupied with other things as you are at a certain age in your life, or just not wanting to move towards working on accepting it. If it's crash landed in your life, it literally turns your world upside down. And, it's just so much. It's so overwhelming at first, or it can be. And I think I just wanted to keep it on the periphery as much as possible. I would just throw my insulin injection in the bottom of my bag somewhere, go about my day, and kind of be very reactive to the needs of my chronic illness. Whereas now I just try as much as possible to be a bit more proactive, to try and think ahead and to plan ahead, and to have the tools and the equipment and the hypo stash that I need on me at all times, to be able to make any decision that I need to make and take the action that I need to take as and when I need to take it, and not get caught short and then get even more frustrated. And I just feel like the more and more I try to push type 1 diabetes away, brush it off, or keep it in the shadows, the more it would kind of come back at me and scream at me. And if you've heard my little type 1 diabetes car analogy, it's kind of coaxing it into the car enough and soothing it enough to get a seatbelt on it, so that it doesn't come crashing at you, flying in through the window, or blocking your view of the windscreen because you've tried to leave it somewhere back down the road. So I've found that the more I've made space for type 1 diabetes, I've been able to go out there and do more. And that has made it easier to handle, because despite this crappy chronic illness, I'm out there living my life in the way that I want to live it, and taking care of my health at the same time. I don't think I subscribe to the idea that you have to be best friends with your type 1 diabetes, because no one wants to live with this thing. I'm not defiant about it. I definitely accept it. I mean, I really can't remember life before it that much. I can't remember looking at a plate of food and just being able to eat it. I can't remember waking up in the morning and not wondering what my glucose reading is. I'm not going to pretend it's my favorite thing in the world, because that is not true. It is way, 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 way down that list. But I think there's a difference between, that kind of boiling anger or disengagement or detachment. And I've been through all of those phases as well. Then just kind of allowing it and making room for type 1 diabetes in my life, because the other choice for me is feeling like shit, and I don't want to feel like shit.
This episode of Type 1 is sponsored by Dexcom. Using Dexcom CGM has given me so much confidence to make informed diabetes treatment decisions in the moment. You can choose to wear it on your arm or your abdomen, which is so great to give those sites a break, and all Dexcom CGMs have the share and follow feature even when connected to an insulin pump, so your family and friends can see your glucose levels and get alerts, giving that extra bit of support when needed. Head to Dexcom.com to request your free Dexcom ONE+ sample. Always read the user manual for important product aspect and limitations. Talk to your doctor for diabetes management terms and conditions and terms of use.
Number 6, let's come out of the deep chat for a minute. So the next one is asking questions of your healthcare team and being prepared to advocate for what you need. Now, there's 2 parts to this. To be able to advocate for what you need to have some information about what it is that you think you might need, to go into those appointments, to ask questions that make that appointment space more collaborative and more productive. That is such precious time that I get with my healthcare team. It's so limited. It's always in a rush, and so much has happened since I last saw them that if I don't go in there at least armed with something I might want to bring up or talk about, which will absolutely change depending on where I'm at in my life, I'm not going to get a lot out of that appointment. And I went into these appointments with such a different mindset for years. I went in thinking it was like a checkbox exercise. It was annoying that I had to take time out of my day to go. I just wanted to go in, answer the questions, tick the box, get prodded and poked and weighed and measured. I would say, no, I'm not planning to get pregnant. I would say, no, I'm not a smoker still. Yes, I can do a wee in that bottle. And sure, I can work on this. And I would be out that door as quickly as possible, smiling and nodding. And I didn't really think that there was another option. But actually now, when I've gone in with something specific that I might be working through or that's frustrating me, or, when it came to thinking about maybe trying an insulin pump or wanting to switch my insulin from NovoRapid to Fiasp, going in with that information that I'd gathered elsewhere outside of my appointment then actually made that appointment very, very productive, because most of the time when I've gone in with an issue or a request, even if I have to kind of, present a case or advocate for myself, more or less I've come away with something that's helped. Something has changed, or I've got new information, or I've got a new prescription, and it's been to my benefit. So I think, as much as, nobody wants to be sat in a doctor's room, and I know that some healthcare professionals are more helpful than others or more attuned to certain parts of this condition than others, I would say find out as much as you can about what you want to know about and go into that appointment with some questions. And there was a point when I started taking notes in my appointments as well, because the jargon's a lot and I know that I haven't got long. So I would start noting things down that maybe have been said, or target ranges, or optimal numbers, or whatever it may be, or where I could get something, or the name of a product. And that also helped, because I think going into an appointment alone and trying to remember everything that's been said, that's not easy either. And, if you don't like your care team, or you don't think they're helping you to be the most fulfilled and healthy and happy version of yourself, you can change your care team as well. That's something I didn't know for a long time. And then there's also more things in place now around something like psychological support, for example, to sort of throw back to some of my earlier points. That wasn't there when I was diagnosed, and it isn't always there for everyone now, but there is stuff out there. So I would just say to my younger self, my less informed self, Jen, go in and ask for what it is that you need. But to go in and ask for what you need to find out what you think you might need to be able to open up those discussions. And I've also come to learn that there's more I can tweak and change than I thought. Because to me, type 1 diabetes is so broad, it impacts every area of my life. It's so kind of shape-shifting that for me to go in and be like, I'm having this specific problem between the hours of 8 and 10 every third Tuesday of the month, I just thought it was kind of pointless to bring up because it felt so inconsistent. But actually, there's more going on, and people do know their stuff, and there might be a reason, there might be a simple fix. I mean, you're not going to fix every problem in the space of a 10-minute appointment, but it's, again, for me, it's just often been a case of I don't know what I don't know. And there are people out there that know so much because their brains work differently, their education has been different, or it's literally their job to be an expert in this field. And thankfully for us now as well, there's like all of this out there. We can go and dig into it. So yeah, that's been a big lesson for me as well. Like, there is no silly question, I guess, is what I'm trying to say there to myself. And it's worth an ask, which is also a nice kind of point to highlight for someone who is kind of used to dealing with this alone and being quite hyper independent with it and quite bad at asking for help around it. So yeah, that's a nice reminder for me right now as we speak today, 30 years into this thing. My next point, I think this is point number 7, is that nobody around you will 100% get it, and that's okay. Now, I'm not speaking about the caregivers of people living with type 1 diabetes, the parents of young children. My goodness me, I actually think you have a harder job. I've said this before, and I will die on this hill. To be impersonating a pancreas when it's my pancreas and I can feel my feelings and know what hypo feels like and have an idea potentially when my blood sugar is soaring because I've got that thirst in my mouth, etc. That's hard enough. To try and do that job when you can't feel those feelings for yourself, I cannot imagine. So this particular point is not to parents of people with type 1 diabetes. You are in this with us 100%. Who I'm referring to here is kind of peripheral people, friends, well-meaning colleagues, even close family. No one really can understand, in my view, what this is like to live with unless you are absolutely living with it, unless you have woken up sweating and shaking at 3 a.m, unless you have had to walk out the door and realize that you've locked your insulin inside and you don't have the keys and you need to get the kids to school, or if you have broken down on the side of a motorway and you're having a hypo and you don't have any hypo treatment with you, or if you are going on a date and you're wondering how to bring up the fact that you wear literally a bionic organ and how they're going to respond to it, or go into a job interview and hope that your diabetes devices don't beep. Those things and how they make me feel, I think it is just very hard for people to understand, even if they want to understand. And that's not to say these people can't help, it's not to say these people can't support, but I think I've kind of been quite not critical, that's the wrong word, but impatient potentially with people in my life who just don't understand that maybe I don't want to go to pizza for pizza on a particular day, whereas last week I was really up for it, and that's not their fault, and it's okay. And they've got stuff going on that you're not going to understand, or that maybe they're not talking about, or maybe they don't feel so good that day for another reason, and you don't get that. And so it's this kind of give and take of patience and kindness and empathy that I think the whole world needs, regardless of what you're going through or what condition you live with, or if you're the healthiest, fittest person in the world, most privileged person in the world. I do think we all have our stuff, and I can articulate my needs. and I can take on my bit in terms of helping others to help me as and when I might need it, but they're never going to get it, and that's okay. But I think most people at least want to try, or they at least maybe even just want to distract you from the washing machine that is type 1 diabetes. And sometimes for me, that's more valuable than talking about type 1 diabetes at all. And one thing I think I've realized recently, quite recently actually, is that someone looking like they're kind of shrugging off the gravity and the seriousness of type 1 diabetes isn't always that they're being dismissive. It's sometimes that they're trying to make me feel better by making it not a big deal. When I've offered that information up and they've brushed it aside a little bit, I've had a couple of experiences where I realized that that's the best response they know in how to kind of respond to what you've just said. And that's not them trying to ignore it, it's them trying to make it smaller for you or for me in those instances. And I'm absolutely not excusing people who are judgmental and rude and who are dismissive and who do think that this is no big deal. I've certainly had people wondering what the hell I'm doing, going on about this thing all the time on my podcast, etc. I mean, first of all, this podcast is not for them. Second of all, I mean, if I could get you to walk a day in these shoes, I would. But, you know, I mean, good luck to them. And we shouldn't be facing stigma or judgment or shame, certainly not from some great auntie twice removed who has no idea about how difficult this is. But I think on the whole, most people are good and kind. This is a condition that even after 30 years, I don't understand 100% fully all of the time. So, you know, I've sort of made a lot of peace with the fact that no one around me really can understand. And that's okay. And speaking of not helping yourself, it's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. Number 8 is you can do anything, but you can't do everything. And this is something that I really needed to learn because for so long I was so defiant about this condition just not being a big deal. As I said before, I'd brush it away. I would be like, don't worry, it's no big deal to everyone around me, colleagues, bosses, family, friends, partners. And I just did not let anyone in at all. And then I would be annoyed when they didn't get it. And it's just like, but actually, this thing is a big deal. It does take a lot to manage. It is really hard sometimes. It does get in the way sometimes. It does frustrate me endlessly. It means that one day I'll be feeling invincible and the next minute I'll be sidelined. I don't need to pretend, or I don't need to try and do everything all at once. A chronic illness is a chronic illness. It is tough. And I wish I'd known sooner that I can pick and choose and put down that armor. And kind of, that doesn't mean that I'm failing at this thing. It doesn't mean type 1 diabetes has won. It means I'm working with my body to the best that I can. It means I'm in tune with my body, which is going to help me in the long run. And that saying no sometimes is going to be much more beneficial than saying yes all the time. Oftentimes to things that I didn't even necessarily really care about. But I guess that's just my personality type, and I'm older and wiser with better boundaries now. But this is all to say that protecting my yes and using my no a little bit more and asking for help a little bit more has helped me a lot and might have saved me a few hypos along the way. A few hypos or a few sticky situations, that's for sure. I need to give credit to Beth Edwards, who I believe is someone that said that to me, or certainly is someone I remember saying that to me. We can do anything, but we can't do everything. Beth is a type 1 diabetes nutritionist. She lives with type 1 diabetes herself, and she was a guest on a previous episode of the Type 1 podcast. And her episode on food psychology and nutrition and type 1 diabetes is one of my most listened to episodes ever. So shout out to Beth for her knowledge, her wisdom, her patience. She has the most soothing voice. So I'd absolutely recommend that episode for many reasons, and I will make sure I will link it below. It's one to check out for sure. Number 9, just because it's what you've always done doesn't mean it's what you should always do. Now, again, like most of these points, this applies to so many things. I mean, we could talk about technology, we could talk about insulin dosing. As I said, I asked to switch my insulin from NovoRapid to Fiasp. That made a huge difference. Something seemingly simple like splitting my long-acting insulin in half back when I was on injections and having half in the morning and half in the evening, that made a huge difference to my blood sugar stability. There is so much, my perspective, my outlook, my feelings towards this condition, all of that shifts quite a lot of the time. I see type 1 diabetes as it's almost like a jellyfish moving through the water. It's like shifting shape, it's shifting size, it's shifting pressure, it changes color, and I'm there moving as well and shifting as well. And so we're kind of both these kind of living and breathing organisms that are trying to figure out some sort of dance side by side all the way through life, no matter what life is throwing at me. And I just feel that changing my mind about what it means to live with type 1 diabetes from one day to the next even is okay because of the nature of this thing. I tried low carb when I first started reading diabetes books. They were books at the time before there was all this information online. I tried, there's just so many ways to manage this condition. And I think from one person to the next, that's going to change. But also for me personally, as I move through different phases of my life, that's going to change as well. My priorities look different now from what they were 10 years ago. And that will be the same for you if you're going into a pregnancy, or if you're going through a really stressful time, or if you're in grief, or, there are times when type 1 diabetes has more of my focus. And there are times when my work has to take more of my focus, or my family has to take more of my focus. And that's when I kind of put the basics in place, thanks to this information that I've gathered over time. And I let it tick over for a bit until I've got the headspace to go back and look at things a bit more closely. I think I thought I had this thing tied up. I kind of knew how to do type 1 diabetes for a little while. And wow, that really came back to bite me in the arse. From a lifestyle point of view, I think there are probably days where I'm really up for a night out with some cocktails and I'll go with it and deal with the admin. And there are other days where I just don't want to do that. I want to stick to my meals and my routine and stay in and do what I know, because I know I need to feel good the next day or whatever. I just can't be bothered to deal with the knock-on decisions and face that extra admin. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to feel differently. I think the way that you articulate that to other people needs some care and attention, because this is your life and your world, and they're just trying to be in it with you. Do you know what I mean? But for me, like, I feel all right that some days I go out there and I do all the things, and some days I don't. And it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be both. And I can be strong, resilient as hell, and really vulnerable and scared sometimes. It can all exist. Number 10 is my final point, and it really is the catch-all for this entire episode, and that is, you are not alone. I could talk for hours about so many more things that I wish I'd known sooner, from how to change the infusion set on my brand new pump after I'd left the hospital and I'd forgotten everything that had been said to me, to not being the only one awake at 3 a.m. trying to fix a hypo. There are so many people out there going through this, which I hate for all of us, but equally, there's just so much community knowledge, information, awareness, understanding, empathy out there from people living with type 1 diabetes, from healthcare professionals, from well-meaning loved ones and strangers. Actually, some of my biggest cheerleaders in life have been other people with type 1 diabetes who I've never met. And that is the beauty that I've found in putting myself out there and being vulnerable and talking about my experiences with this condition. And I'm not saying that you have to do that. If you want to be a passive observer of type 1 diabetes, well, you already are, because you're either watching this or listening to it. And thank you so much. And you are exactly who I'm trying to reach. So I do hope this has been helpful, because there was a time that I really thought I was the only person in the whole wide world who felt the way I did about living with type 1 diabetes. I was finding it so hard, so lonely, quite scary at times. Go online, find your people, and not everyone living with type 1 diabetes is going to be for you. And I understand that it can be overwhelming as well. So just in the spirit of curiosity, I would say to myself, like, there are people out there. I didn't want to speak about my type 1 diabetes for a long time. And as soon as I started writing, you could not shut me up because of what it gave me, because of the bonds I made and the people I started interacting with. You can only meet yourself where you're at. And I would just encourage you, maybe if you don't want to go to something in person just yet, there is stuff online. Or maybe it's vice versa for you. Maybe you want real world conversation and you don't like the social media side of type 1 diabetes. The takeaway here is you're not alone. And of course, if you need support, speak to your healthcare professionals. You're not alone in this. And I felt so alone at one point, and I don't want anyone to ever feel the way I felt for such a long time. So that is my final point, because I think that really encompasses everything I'm trying to speak about today. So those are some of the things I wish I'd known sooner. And as I said, I don't even feel like I've scratched the surface, because there are so many practical things that come up on a day-to-day basis, even like, oh, have you tried this HypoFix? These taste really nice. Or, oh, I tried this barrier cream and this one didn't work, but this one did. And this pump belt is amazing. It feels so lightweight. There is just so much stuff out there. So I could be here all day, but neither of us needs or wants that. So I hope this has been helpful in some way for you. Thank you so much for joining me today. Wherever you are watching from, I really appreciate you taking the time to press play, and I will speak to you all soon. Take care. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Type 1 Please remember that nothing you hear on this podcast should be taken as medical advice. I'm definitely not a healthcare professional. If you like what you hear, hit subscribe and do leave a little review on iTunes if you have time. It really helps to spread the word about type 1 diabetes. And thank you so much for listening.